everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Irene and today's video is all about my sewing mistakes I made. I'm gonna tell you all about them so that you don't make the same mistakes. Let's go. Mistake number one, and the one that I made repeatedly and the worst one, is not learning the settings, I guess, of my serger, my overlocker, well enough. I made so many mistakes because of this. It was just something simple and very boring to do, which was just open a YouTube video or the manual of my serger and just learn really well how to use it, which I kept postponing. You have to be really careful with the serger, especially when the blade is on, because it already happened to me to accidentally rip the first thing I ever made. Since that machine is an investment, it's important to actually learn how to use it so that you can get the most out of it. So another mistake I made, especially in the beginning, this happened to me, is not testing the markers, charcoal, whatever crayon I'm using to mark my fabric, and marking both sides of the fabric. I now use only carbon paper most of the time, or charcoal. I never use those wash away sort of marker pens because I had a terrible experience with them. The first garment I ever made, I used them, and every time I would like sew, like, I don't know, a dart, I would go and press it, which is the correct way, but then I noticed in the end that that pencil mark, that marker mark, would just become sort of a bleach stain and it would not go away. It would just bleach the fabric. Don't do it. Don't iron over that if you're going to use it, and always test it on your fabric before you use it, because it's really terrible when you finish a beautiful garment and it's almost perfect and there's these horrible stain marks everywhere on it, and yeah, that's something easily avoidable. So another mistake I made was using the wrong thickness of interfacing, especially using a thicker one than necessary on a thin fabric. That one looks horrible. It looks like cardboard. It just doesn't match the thing. And another one is using the wrong color of interfacing. I once made the mistake of using a white interfacing on top of a black garment because I was just distracted, and here where I live, at the store, they don't sell black ones, so I didn't think about the fact that it existed and I should just order it online. It just didn't cross my mind, and if I could go back, I would use a black one for a black garment and the other way around as well. Interfacing is like such an important part of sewing, and it can easily ruin a garment, and since, especially if you're using fusible interfacing, it can be almost permanent most of the time. So like, be careful, test it before you use it, just like with everything. When you're sewing, test it and check that it doesn't feel like cardboard. Check the thickness and then actually fuse it onto your garment. A lot of people just don't think about stay stitching, and it's just a really important part of sewing, and when your garment gets stretched out, it just becomes so difficult to fix that. It's impossible when it gets super, for example, on a neckline, if it gets super enlarged and it's like gaping, that's just not a good look, and it just mucks up the fit of the garment and all that. So just easily preventable. Use a stay stitching 1/4 of an inch inside your seam line, and you're going to prevent so many things. So always stay stitch. Another mistake that is very common is forgetting understitching. And if you're wondering what understitching is, because it sounds strange, it is when you want to hide a facing. For example, imagine if I had a facing here like that, and it's sort of showing, it's poking through, and I want to hide it. What I would do is, since there's a facing and underneath the facing there's like a seam allowance, I would sew the facing and the seam allowance underneath it together, and that seam allowance would pull down the facing, and from the front you would see nothing. No stitching, no poking out facings, nothing. Another way you can prevent a facing from poking out like that is using top stitching, but that is visible. It's up to you which one you want to use, but understitching is absolutely a genius way to prevent that, and it makes your garments look so much more professional. So understitching, you can find a lot of videos on YouTube on how to do that in a more detailed way. But yeah, definitely learn about it if you don't know it. So the next mistake is not changing my roller cutter blades regularly enough. I'm one of those people who don't like using shears or scissors to cut my fabric, because I don't like the fact that it sort of pulls up the fabric, and I feel like it's not so precise, at least for me. So I prefer cutters, but I used to not change the blades for a long time, especially when you sort of just bought it and it comes with this cheap blade. That blade does not cut as well as another one that you could just swap it with. New blades cut so much better, especially if you buy a better quality one, and that makes a huge difference, because sometimes with cutters, especially if you don't have a good blade, you have to like go back and forth, and you might accidentally cut your pattern piece, or you know, not have a very precise cut there. So changing your cutter blades very regularly is an important thing. When I have a new project that I really care about, I always change it no matter what. Another big mistake is when you make a mock-up and the garment is supposed to have a zipper, and you just sort of don't want to do it. You don't want to add that zipper there, so you just hold it with your hand or like pin it, and it's just not that precise. Don't do it. If you're gonna do that, just don't make the mock-up at all, because seriously, it is so important that you try it on with the zipper. Even if you just pin the zipper, sometimes if you're really too lazy to do that, you can just pin the zipper, but put the zipper there. It changes the look, it changes the fit. You need to see it with the zipper on. Another mistake I made related to zippers is, you know, when your pattern says use a zipper that is 23 centimeters long, and you buy one that is exactly 23 centimeters, and then you realize that, for example, especially if it's a tight garment, I once made a skirt, a pencil skirt, and I did exactly that, and then it just wasn't long enough, because you know, when you sew a zipper, you already like around like 2-3 inches of it goes to waste, because it's like left as a tail inside underneath. You can't just go all the way till the end of the zipper. And so the second time I wore the skirt, it just ripped, and I now have to cut that back piece again and fix that and use a longer zipper. So every time you're going to buy a zipper for a pattern, make sure you buy one that is like 2, 3, 4 inches longer. Okay, so another mistake that can be easily avoided and that greatly improves the look of your finished garment is when you're sewing a dart, you should pay attention to a few things that I'm going to count now. First of all, you should never start from the pointy end. You should always start from the large side of that triangle. And you can backstitch there, but do not backstitch the tip, the end. Instead of backstitching, you just leave a long tail, you cut it, and then you pull out, you pull one of the strings, and that pulls out the other side, and you sort of take it to that side, if that makes sense, and you just make a knot, double knot. And that is going to keep your dart much less pointy. And another thing is you can put a pin 1 centimeter before the pointy end of your dart, and when you reach that 1 centimeter point, you can start curving the tippy end of that dart. It's going to look way better, because it's not like our bodies are triangular, so it's not supposed to go that sharp. It's supposed to be a little bit curvy, and you're going to see that it's going to look so much more natural. And of course, the most important thing with darts is pressing correctly, and preferably using a pressing cushion, so that you can find exactly the right shape, place your dart there, and then press it correctly that way. And your darts are going to look so much less pointy and so much more beautiful, and they're going to be almost invisible. That's really important to have a garment that looks professional and good quality. So these are all the mistakes I made since I started, which was last spring. It's been almost a year now, and through all these mistakes that were super frustrating, I still improved a lot. I still have a long way to go, but It's really fun to learn sewing and learn from your mistakes. And so if you have already also made other mistakes that I haven't included in this video because I haven't made them, definitely write them in the comments so that we can all prevent those mistakes from happening and we can all learn through your comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful to you. Happy sewing!